Hey, Creep Cult, welcome to your weekly Patreon bonus episode. We are continuing with the Alphabet Roulette, which we have finally figured out the name of this thing. And we are on B, so we're talking about Battlefield Earth.
Fucking kill me.
Capital B for bad.
Real bad.
Yeah, pretty much. So if you don't know, this is widely considered one of, if not the worst movie ever made.
Plan 9 from outer space for the modern era.
Right. So just a little background, directed by Roger Christian, who, outside of directing this movie, has a pretty crazy technical filmography.
He was recommended to direct this movie by George Lucas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when Travolta was looking for a director, they approached Tarantino first. Tarantino said, fucking no thanks. And then...
Smart.
Yeah, so then they were just looking for a director who would helm this crazy thing, and Lucas was like, oh, this guy's talented. He's working on a bunch of my stuff.
He did, yeah. So he was art director, and...
He was second
Star
unit
Wars.
director for Phantom Menace.
Yeah,
so he had
crazy.
Yeah, just come off of that. And I mean, you can...
Worked on Alien...
Yeah.
And a few other things like that, where it's like, damn, dude, like you got some.
So that was the first confusing thing for me. It was just like, how does a person with this much talent let such a criminal act take place and be released
right
for the world to see?
Lots and lots of money, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So I think that honestly, the background stuff and the behind the scenes of this movie is way more hilarious and interesting than the movie itself is.
So you want to just.
But we can
into,
briefly
what
go
it's
into
about?
what the movie is about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's based.
3,000.
Yeah, not much has changed, but they live underwater. This is based on a book by a little known indie author called L. Ron Hubbard. You may recognize that name from an episode of South Park, where they talk all about L. Ron Hubbard's Church of Scientology. So that's the first bit of nail in the coffin. Yeah,
also,
nail in the coffin for this movie.
This movie is based off the first half of that book.
Which I will say, I did my extra little bit of research. I did not go and read Battlefield Earth, but what I did is I read the Wikipedia synopsis of it to see, like, okay, would a second movie in this story, assuming this first one had been done well, would it make sense? And really, all of the exciting, cool stuff happens in this first half, and then the rest of the book is just, like, pretty much, as far as I could tell, nothing. So, I mean, I guess we were saved the trauma of having to go through an even worse sequel to this movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was curious. I was like, oh, maybe we missed. It's a Dune situation where maybe like, oh, the part 2 is like where the really important, like, world changing stuff happens. Pretty much all, like, the climax of this movie is pretty much like the most exciting part of the book.
Well, there you go.
And other than that, it does go very Dune, where it's like, and then this is what happened to Johnny Goodboy or whatever his name is. Like, this is how he went on and became old, and his whole story after that. It's not very interesting. But the book also received very mixed reviews. Some people, like Neil Gaiman, thought it was fucking amazing. Other reviewers thought it was just a terrible, incoherent mess. And I think most people with the movie just leaned on the one side of terrible, incoherent mess. But yeah, it's in the year 3000. There's Travolta, yeah.
And who else we want to
Whitaker.
mention?
Forrest Whitaker.
And then the main man animal is Barry Pepper.
Yeah, and the whole movie I was like, guys, that's so clumsy. Stop calling them man animals. Just manimals. Just put it together. Or just call them man. Yeah, it's like man animal. But
they don't have portmanteaus on Cyclos.
Yeah. So the Cyclos are what John Travolta and Forrest Whitaker's race are. They're these like 9-foot tall, big-headed dudes, and they rule galaxies and universes, and they have come to Earth and conquered it, and there's pretty much like, I think what I read was something like 3,000 people left on the planet, or some crazy small amount, and they all live in these little basically caveman tribes in these secret zones on planet Earth. And John Travolta and crew have a whole scheme of kidnapping and forcing the humans to mine gold for them, because they cannot mine the gold in this area because it's in a radioactive area. And we find out eventually that they're like breathing chemical that they breathe reacts explosively with radiation. that was like the one kind of cool element of this movie where I was like, that's a neat idea that like the humans have been able to hide away from the Psylocke law. I keep wanting to call him Psylocke, but that's an X-Men character, right?
PSYCHLOS?
The PSYCHLOS.
Yeah.
They've been able to hide away from them in these radioactive zones, but then the main character brings up the point, but like also they're all slowly dying because of radiation, but it's their only way to like hide from the PSYCHLOS.
I had a really dumb thought. Do you think that his name was Ron Hubbard and then he just dropped an L into it to be L. Ron Hubbard? And that's what he did with the word psycho. He was like, I'm just going to put L's in places.
So actually,
PSYCHLOS.
the reason they're called PSYCHLOS, in the book, the backstory of the PSYCHLOS is that they used to be like a timid mining species that were subjugated by like their upper ruling class, and they were called like cystics or something. But basically, if you take the PSYCHLOS and this other thing and you put them together, it's supposed to sound like psychiatrists. Because L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology are very strongly against psychiatrists, and L. Ron Hubbard hated psychiatry and mental health, medication and help and everything. Partially because he had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia by like several psychiatrists, and he was like, "No, I'm not crazy.
I'm a prophet.
You guys are evil, and you're trying to stop my prophecy of Scientology and Dianetics from expanding and saving the world." Which is why I think it was probably Tom Cruise who got in a bunch of trouble for shaming. I think it was Brooke Shields for taking medication for postpartum depression.
Yeah, you're being very glib.
Yeah,
that was the soundbite for a while. Was him improperly using the word glib.
Yeah, so the whole like, if you really want to drill down, like the miners on planet Earth in this movie, to the core of what he's trying to say here, it's supposed to be a story about psychiatrists subjugating the human population and turning them into slaves, and how humans are like fighting back against psychiatrists, and that's why they have like the giant heads and
I just woke up from the little nap that I took because that shit sounds fucking boring.
Yeah, and that's not even stuff that's in the plot. I mean, really, we could get into the plot, but it really makes no fucking sense. But basically, the bare bones is, yes, John Travolta's character, he's stuck on Earth because he's been kind of like, something happened between him and a senator's daughter, I guess, and so as punishment, he has to stay on Earth. He hates it, so he hatches this scheme to get a bunch of gold and make himself rich back on his home planet by forcing Johnny Goodboy, whatever, and his crew to mine this gold. But they make the mistake of hooking Johnny Goodboy up to the Riddler machine from Batman Forever, and he gets all the knowledge. And if you blink and you miss that part of the movie, the rest of it makes even less sense, because you're like, how the fuck does he suddenly know like
how to talk
mathematics, and he talks like it, and he knows how to talk like them, and they don't have any sort of distinction between the alien
scene
talk and
about him explaining a fucking equilateral triangle made me want to fucking gouge my eyes and ears out. Like, I just the sides and the angles, they're all equal. I'm like, who fucking cares? I didn't watch a sci-fi movie for fucking arithmetic, all right?
Also,
I also get very angry when math is in the movies that I'm watching.
Also, like, they just wouldn't understand. They don't know what an angle is.
Yeah.
Probably.
What's an angle?
Yeah, like, they would all think that he is just fucking insane because he's sitting there, like, scribbling all over the prison cell floor about, like, and then space and the universe and triangles and, all this stuff.
Coming from a
like,
race that,
what?
at the beginning of the movie, called statues, like, people were frozen by the gods.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, man.
So then he hatches a plot to train a bunch of these guys in a flight simulator for Harrier jets, and then they use all these jets to fight back at the PSYCHLOS, and they end up sending back a dirty bomb to their planet, and it reacts with their atmosphere, and it wipes them all out.
Which is super fucked up and seems crazy. But in the meantime, the humans are trying to escape, and Travolta has blackmail against Forrest Whitaker, and then Forrest Whitaker gets blackmail against him, and they seem like everything seems like it's trying to be a one-liner. The acting is so fucking weird in this movie. Forrest Whitaker actually wasn't awful,
but I think it's just because he barely speaks.
But I was like, oh my god, like Travolta was terrible, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was like, have you ever acted before?
Yeah, it's crazy because he was able to make this movie pretty much off of the success of Pulp Fiction. like I almost wanted to go watch Pulp Fiction immediately after to like try to remind myself
Eyebleach.
that John Travolta like wasn't just an awful terrible person, but for making this. But I think it's also worse that this movie was made because Travolta like put millions of dollars of his own money into it. Yeah. He like roped in a bunch of his Scientology and non-Scientology friends to try to help out, even though the Church of Scientology claims they had no involvement with the movie. Down to the point of like, rather than doing regular press for this movie, Travolta would just sign copies of the L. Ron Hubbard book for people. Like,
really?
so this whole thing kind of like people from the very get-go before this came out, and this was in development for years. Before it even came out, people were like, "Oh, this is just going to be trying to brainwash people into Scientology," and like the whole thing is a ploy by the church to like try to get into Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
And so people like already were prepped to hate this movie. So even if it had been good, I don't think it would have been well received. And the fact that it's obviously just terrible in every respect on top of that just blew up in Travolta's face and everybody else's face to the point where pretty much everybody involved in this movie outside of the producer have apologized for it.
Really?
Yeah, in future interviews. The writer was like, hey, at least I can say if I was going to make a bad movie, at least I made the worst movie of all time. He's like,
I'm
that's
so
kind
good
of
at
cool.
being the
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, just for reference, this movie cost $73 million in the year 2000. That's probably a little bit different than what
Can
that
you
would be
convert
today.
that for the year 3000?
Yeah.
What's inflation then?
Gold. And
Insurance money.
Yeah. So we've talked about it before. A movie needs to double its budget, basically, to make a profit. And this movie made $29.7 million, which is still, I feel like a lot for this, but not nearly even close to its budget. So it completely tanked. I mean, it lost, what is that, like 40 mil?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess people in press screenings were like openly laughing and guffawing and everything during the movie. And then in a press event after the movie, when Travolta was like, hey, how'd you guys all like it? There was dead silence from everybody in the audience.
Can you imagine him having to go on to like the late night circuit and those guys are always like, yeah, I loved your movie. And they'd be like, oh.
Yeah, I would be interested to go back and see if there are interviews like that where the guy, like whoever the host is, does say like, oh, I loved it. It was so cool. Travolta, I think, also partially shot himself in the foot by hyping this up as like the greatest thing ever. I have some quotes here from him. He described it as Pulp Fiction for the year 3000. He described it as like Star Wars, only better. And he also described it as the Schindler's List of sci-fi.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, so
I'm gonna say no.
It's
None of
none
that.
of those things.
Yeah.
according to Bill Mechanic, who was the former head of 20th Century Fox, who Travolta had tried to approach. Eventually, they ended up having to get this other studio to finance that is known for financing pet projects for celebrities by cutting their salaries down, like way down, and saying like, I'll help you make your movie, but I'm not paying you your regular fee.
Sure.
So chop it way down and we'll make the movie. But Bill Mechanic from 20th Century Fox said, John wanted me to make Battlefield Earth. He had Scientologists all over me. They came up to me and said, and they knew who I was, and they would go, we're really excited about Battlefield Earth. And he said, this did not impress him. Do you think in any way, shape, or form that weirding me out is going to make me want to make this movie?
But then he did it.
No, so
they
then-
didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
then he
So
went
then
to
Franchise Pictures ended up picking it up and actually found out about it from a producer named Cassian Elwes, who I found out is the brother of Carrie Elwes.
Hey.
So a little Saw connection there. So yeah, they ended up picking it up, making the movie, cutting Travolta's budget way down, and then he obviously put a bunch of money up to make the movie. So big loss for him.
Yeah.
One studio executive said, on any film, there are 10 variables that can kill you. On this film, there was an 11th, Scientology. It just wasn't something anyone really wanted to get involved with. Apparently, fellow Scientologist Tom Cruise warned Warner Brothers not to make the movie, but then later a spokesperson came out and said he had never said that. But I kind of believe that he probably did. 'Cause
Yeah.
I feel like Tom Cruise would look at that script and be like, maybe you don't.
Yeah,
he
as
does-
crazy of a person he is, like he knows how to make some pretty damn good movies.
He also seems like the kind of person who is very clear about like keeping a separation between what he believes in his real life and what he's willing to act in and put forward on the screen. Because I mean, if I think back at Tom Cruise movies, I have a hard time thinking of ones that aren't good.
Well, he is someone who, despite all of his personal beliefs and all of that shit, he fucking knows and loves movies.
Yeah.
Like, he gets it, and he knows what makes a good crowd-pleasing movie, and obviously that shows in stuff like, you know, Top Gun Maverick, and I'm sure the new Mission Impossible movies are going to be gangbusters. But something that we definitely have to talk about with this movie is that no matter how good the script was going to be, or the story, or any of the concepts, this movie is completely unwatchable in a technical aspect.
It's so every scene has like 400,000 cuts.
Yeah,
and
so it's
all of it's shot in
it's
Dutch
either
angles.
slow fades from the middle of the screen, or it's 100 cuts in the same scene. So yeah, watching this, it was giving me a headache, and I was trying to keep up with it because I was like, oh, like every time I would start to think there was a cool aspect, they would do some other weird, crazy shit with it. But
and those dissolves, man.
Yeah,
like every fucking scene that feels like a Star Wars rip.
Oh,
not,
absolutely,
and not in a good way.
Well, and I told him because the version that we watched happened to have a German language intro crawl, and I was like, well, I mean, if it had been in English, it wouldn't have helped me understand the movie any better. And I told you, I was like, it's funny that the intro was in German because all the angles were Dutch.
Deutsch.
Well, we're behind the paywall here. So, did you guys watch it on F2?
Yeah.
Yeah. Allegedly.
So, I found it on YouTube.
Oh.
Yeah, the whole thing's on YouTube.
I never think to check the old YouTube.
Yeah. I ended up switching off of that and I found a different one online.
Well, Roger Christian, the director, said that all of the Dutch angles were an attempt to make it have a comic book feel, which I don't really understand because
they said the same thing. Yeah, they said the same thing about.
Well, Ang Lee's Hulk is an example of like where he has all the million split screens, and to me that makes more sense because that's straight up just imagery taken from how comic books are laid out. In this, I'm pretty sure in most comic books, like one, the panels are not tilted like this, and two, the composition is usually like in a way that you can understand where people are standing and what's going on in a scene and not feel like, I mean, I just laid on my side at one point watching the movie and I felt like it made more sense that way.
So there were even just centering the focus of the shot. Like there were so many scenes where if you guys weren't in the room and I was recording a video just at the camera, where this would be where Travolta was at in the scene. Nobody else, just him off to the side. And it makes no fucking sense.
Yeah.
Like if he's the person you're focused on, fucking center the shot. There's nothing in the background, it's just gray sky.
Yeah, I mean if there's nothing else going on in the shot, I'm not saying I 100% agree with that, but I get what you're saying.
Well, and the cinematographer, Giles Nutgens, has gone on record as saying that the overuse of color filters and Dutch angles wasn't his idea and that he was given an incredibly small lighting budget to work with. So maybe because he wasn't able to light the scenes the way he wanted to, they just felt like, oh, okay, well, we'll just randomly in a bunch of scenes throw like a harsh Cameron-style blue filter over everything, and then in other scenes we'll throw like a harsh orange filter over everything, and then other scenes we'll just not have a color filter, and the film for like 2 minutes actually looks like a real movie. There's like one scene where the humans are standing like on the edge of a cliff, and I think they shot it in a real place, like a cliff with a river down there, and I was like, this looks like a real movie. And then, you know, a fucking rip-off CG ship comes in, and you're like, oh, never mind.
It's very muddy. You can barely tell what's going on, and then a lot of the action does this weird slow-mo shit, but way too much, where it's not actually anything happening. It'll be like a character like crawling across the floor, and it'll just be slow-mo, and like, this isn't even like a fun action scene.
What year
man.
did this come out in?
2001?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's right off the Matrix.
Yeah.
So that's why there's all the slow-mo and everything. But it's not done as well, and I think a lot of it is just taking frames out. So it's like that stuttery, like weird slow-mo.
May 10th, 2000. Oh, sorry, May 12th in the United States.
Yeah. So the script is awful. I looked into some of these other people in the crew to try to see what else they had done, and for the most part, nothing that I even recognized or other terrible movies. So it really just sounds like if the Scientology aspect hadn't been a part of it, and this had just been like an unrelated sci-fi book, which is what Travolta, and I think this is a sign that you're probably like, lying to yourself when you have to spend so much time in pre-production and before that, like explaining to people like, no, it's not a Scientology thing. It's just a cool sci-fi story. It's just a cool sci-fi story. And nobody fucking believes you. By the time this finally got made and with the financiers that it was made with, there was no way he was going to get, really talented people to do all this stuff. And like, yeah, the director's talented, but if he's surrounded by 1 million people who don't know what they're doing, like a director can only do so much. And especially somebody on, I guess, his first film directing, not just doing second unit, but
yeah, at the same time, that guy was an art director for movies and he was a set decorator for movies, and it's like, what happened, man? Like,
well,
you have insight into
some of the
this.
sets look like they might have been cool if they had been lit at all to where you could see what was going on, or like some of the costumes might have been cool if they had been on different people who were better actors. I don't know. But to kind of go ahead.
I was gonna ask you, like, what was your overall experience with it? Did you have to do a couple sittings, or did you power through? Or
I could not power through. I also could not just focus on it. I just kept getting angry and then turning it off and walking away from it. And I'd come back and I'd watch it in a couple minutes. And then I was like, I can't do this. So eventually I got to the point where it was on the iPad and I played Dark Souls 3. And that was how I kept myself entertained. And if I got into a really important fight, I'd pause the movie. And if I felt like there was something important dialogue happening wise, I'd pause the game. And I just
never paused the game.
And there were a couple times where I was like, oh, I missed something that was probably important, and I'd go and I'd hit back a couple times.
I didn't even do that.
begrudgingly.
I told Adrian that the one redeeming quality of this movie was that I could fall asleep for 5 to 10 minutes at a time and like not have to rewind it to figure out what had happened. Just be like, oh, okay, it doesn't really matter. None of this makes sense anyway.
Well, and on top of that, like every action that's taken by each of the characters, specifically in anything that Travolta is doing, any action he would take, he would then describe for 4 to 5 minutes following. Just constantly, like, doing something and then saying exactly what he did. And, like, the most, like, caricature-esque, like...
Well, perfect example is, like, I thought it was kind of cute when he did the whole thing where he was like, okay, I'm going to have Forrest Whitaker repeat my evil plan, and I'm going to record him, and we get to see, like, the little cameras come out of the wall, and he does the whole recording and everything. And I was like, ooh, that's cool. He won't say anything after this. He'll leave. And then later in the movie, it'll come up that he's blackmailed Forrest Whitaker and he'll hold that against him and show him the video. No, immediately after he films it, he goes, by the way, I just filmed a video of you. So if you try to do anything, it's just like, yeah, everything they felt like, okay, we just need to make sure we're beating the audience over the head with this, which is the worst kind of sci-fi.
It seems
in my opinion,
like a parody. Like if
Parody's
you
nuts,
didn't
got
know... All right.
That one's been on the table since last week.
Yeah, I can't believe he got you 2 weeks in a row with that.
Yeah.
You did that last week?
Yeah, because we watched Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which is...
I didn't catch it. Anyway.
You actually complimented on him on
Is it
last
like,
week.
oh, you're like, oh, that was...
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, you were like, that was a good one. You
Your
actually got me.
Anyway, if you watch this movie not knowing that it was a serious endeavor and people were taking it seriously trying to get it made, then it seems like it's a joke.
You think it was an asylum type film.
Yeah,
like
it's
you were saying.
totally. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's like
even the way that
happening?
like everything is so oversaturated, like it just feels very asylum. And then just like the little, $2 spaceship flying around, like
it made me want to watch Meth Alligator or whatever the fuck that was.
Yeah, I think it's Meth Gator and Crocodile or something like that now. There's the new one they're working on. But to kind of wrap it up, I wanted to read some of the best quotes that I found from people involved or reviewers who saw this, because there's a lot of really good ones. One reviewer labeled the screenplay saying that it was as entertaining as watching a fly breathe. Jon Stewart from The Daily Show mocked it as a cross between Star Wars and the smell of ass. Ebert noted that the film contains no evidence of Scientology or any other system of thought. And this movie actually made Franchise Pictures in 2007 go bankrupt because they were sued by foreign investors who had distributed the film for fraud, because they overinflated what the budget of this movie actually was so that they could get more money and then put it into people's pockets. And this whole Franchise Pictures collapsed after this. Also, I think the toy company that put out toys for this, there were action figures, also collapsed as a result.
They really thought this was going to hit.
I bet that the figures that remain now, I bet are probably worth some money.
To who, though?
to fucking people like us, fucking idiots.
Don't put me in the camp of it as somebody who would buy a Battlefield Earth action figure. Only if I can get the friendly bartender's head. But I think it's funny because Forrest Whitaker, who has since apologized for being in this movie, is probably really happy that he went on to be in actual Star Wars after this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and playing
he's had a great career after this.
Dude, I mean, just a few short years after this, he's in Last King of Scotland, and is fantastic in that film. And what's really funny is he's basically a villain in that movie and does it flawlessly.
Yeah, it's so weird, man. Like, they should have known and done, I don't know. I mean, his performance was okay to me. I didn't mind seeing him, but, like, Travolta should have fucking known that, like, this is bad.
I mean, that's 20 years before he said Adele Dazeem. Like, I don't think there's been anything going on in John Travolta's head for a while. He also wasn't he in a movie that was directed by Fred Durst not that long ago?
Oh, The Fanatic?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that, yeah, I mean, really.
Oh, is the F pick? Or?
I mean, I would be curious, but
I don't think it falls into the genres, so I'm going to say no. But really, I think it's just one of those cases where either it's the Scientology brainwashing, where it's like he couldn't see the forest for the trees because he was just so obsessed with this idea of making this happen, or this happens a lot. You get a lot of money, you're in the Hollywood system, you have some pet project idea where you're like, this is going to pop off if I get it made. And especially if you've spent 10 years or whatever trying to get it made, I'm sure by the time you finally make it happen, you're just like, oh fuck yeah, it's been so long, like this movie's gonna bust a nut so hard in the audience face. I don't know what John Travolta probably said about it, but he was wrong either way. Yeah. And but it's gone on to make a lot of successful internet videos about how terrible it is. A lot of people probably got high view counts off of this. I'm pretty sure, doesn't Stuckman have a Hilariosity review from back in the day for Battlefield Earth?
Oh, really?
I got about halfway through the movie and I was like, if I could probably get through this.
I consider just going and watching the Hilariosity
because he gives the whole story.
I just felt integrity wise, I was like, I can't come to the show. That's always been, at least for me, I'm never going to come to the show and talk shit about a movie if I haven't given it the time to watch the whole thing. So I did, and I regret it.
We did. I don't regret it. I honestly don't. I think that I would show it to somebody just to make them have to watch it. But I'm glad that we did it because it's just one of those things that you have to.
Well, it's like The Room, or
yeah,
where it's like it's so bad it's good.
No.
This is so bad it's bad. It doesn't hit the good.
It's so bad it's worse.
Well, the positive reviews I've seen from it are this is fun to watch with friends and drinks.
Oh,
and so I think it's just one of those movies where, if we were doing a commentary on this, it probably would have been a blast. But just because we would have been so baffled the whole time, that our reactions would have been the fun part.
Right.
But watching it alone and trying to get through this 2-hour movie, it was painful. But yeah, like you said, it is kind of a badge of honor to say that we've seen it, and at least now I can talk shit about it with education.
There you go. That's what we all want. All right, cool. Well, we don't recommend it. I'm going to speak for them because I already know, and I'm sure you could tell based off of that. But we will go ahead and bring up our wheel of 3 possibilities.
What have you got for us this week, Rat Brain?
So I'm going with Chud, I believe I said, right?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to go with Children of Men.
Ooh.
And I'm going with Cry Wolf.
Ooh. I'm actually excited for any of these.
Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
Let's see what we get.
All right.
No Tonys, no Tonys, no Tonys.
Spin that wheel.
Spin that wheel.
It's Chud. How is this happening?
That's what we call the Tony trifecta.
Okay. So just as an experiment, spin it again and see if it lands on Chud again. Because if it does, I'm calling bullshit. I'm fine watching Chud, though. I'm not mad about that.
It's Chud again. I don't know what the fuck is going on.
More. Sorry, you get what you pay for.
So we're just trying to troubleshoot this before we go through 23 more letters in the alphabet.
Is it always just land on whatever's in that top right, top left box? Oh, no. There you go.
No, there we go. Now it's something different. I'm interested. I want to try something different. All right, so...
Do you have to do this on show?
Huh?
It's like show-worthy?
So I'm going to try one thing real quick.
Anyway, if you're listening and we didn't specify what's happening, Chud is the movie that we are going to be watching based off our alphabet roulette, and we are experimenting to see if there's a fluke because I have won 3 weeks in a row, I guess.
Yeah, any of us getting a streak that long becomes suspicious, but when it's a computer thing like that, I'm just like, let the tech guy make sure that we ain't got no bugs. But I'm like I said, I'm totally fine watching Chud, cannibalistic humanoid underground dweller.
All right, so this is what I think I'm going to do next week, is I'm going to put 2 of each to add more variety to the wheel.
Oh, okay. Smaller spaces.
Yes.
Chud.
it was Cry Wolf this time, because the pie pieces are so small, it'll make it more likely that it'll land in different spaces. Because the spaces were so huge, it just seemed like it wasn't quite working right. But we were all going to be watching Chud, so prepare ourselves for that, I guess.
What? Are you not looking forward to it?
I mean, here's the deal. I've thrown up some like 90 plus gold, and it keeps getting tossed to the wayside by B movies and worse.
No, the B movies were this previous week. These are now the C movies.
It's true. It's true.
But yeah, I think that just what that means is we have to come each week with really, really killer movies, and
I don't think this is going to be bad.
I'm
excited for it.
I think Chud's going to be fun.
Intentional camp.
Yeah,
which is a lot different than what the fuck
I'm
we
fine.
just
and
watched.
like you said, it's not like we're going to be suffering through it like we did this week. But if you enjoyed this conversation, feel free to
tell all your friends.
Maybe steal their credit cards and sign them up for the No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. FBI. I'm just kidding. Yeah, go ahead and follow us through the rest of the alphabet. I'm very curious to see what other picks we come up with for.
And if you guys want to throw a pick, we'll throw it on the wheel. Shoot us a message.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. But I'll still win. All right. We good?
Let's call it.
Yeah, let's get some chubbies and some chuddies. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.
Keep it creepy.